Welcome in. I'm Tatum Everett here inside TCO Studios alongside NFL Network's Tom Pelissero here for this Microsoft Teams one-on-one. And Tom, you have been one busy man the last 72 hours with 7 open head coaching positions and 3 general manager vacancies. There's a lot of buzz around the league. So from what you're hearing, how appealing are these Vikings openings?
The Vikings jobs are certainly appealing to candidates within the league for a variety of reasons, starting out with the fact that you've got a really good facility in Eagan, that you've got a good stadium. You certainly have a fan base. You've also got good young talent on the roster, starting out with guys like Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook. And you've certainly had an ownership group in the Wilfs who have been supportive, both financially and otherwise, through the years of their football operation. This is the first time in the Wilfs tenure, really going back all the way to 2006, that you've had a full blow up of the football operation at once. So a chance to hit reset here. Certainly Rick Spielman, over 16 years, did a lot for the organization and had some really good drafts and good players, and there were memorable moments. And same thing with Mike Zimmer over his 7 seasons, winning a couple of playoff games. But now as the organization looks to move forward, there's certainly going to be a lot of candidates that are very interested in this opening.
Yeah, definitely the clean slate here in Minnesota. And the Wolves have been very clear they're going to take their time in making both of those hires. And just by scrubbing your Twitter last night, several interview requests from not just the Vikings, but all of the teams who are currently looking for some leadership right now. What's the latest when it comes to who the Vikings are interested in?
Well, Mark Wilf said it in his press conference announcing the changes that they're going to hire the general manager first, which is significant here because that follows a more traditional structure that you've had in the NFL, where it's going to be the GM who's the head coach's boss and plays a big role in hiring that person, which also means that it becomes a more attractive opening to GM candidates because they know they're not going to be in an arranged marriage with a head coach. They're not going to come in and the head coach is already in place. They're going to get a big say in the overall direction of the program. So some of the names that were on that list, Elliott Wolf, who is a longtime Packers executive, the son of Ron Wolf, one of the great GMs in NFL history. Most recently has been with the Patriots. He's part of the sounding board for Bill Belichick. He's spent his entire adult life and even growing up really in the football industry and has gained a lot out of being in a few different programs in recent years, seeing how different people do things. He's one of the respected executives within the league and is going to be a good hire at some point for someone. Also, 2 of the Browns executives, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, as well as Glenn Cook. Glenn Cook's their vice president of player personnel, somebody who came up on the scouting side. Adofo-Mensah has a little bit different resume than you see really from anybody in terms of being a walk-on basketball player in the Ivy League. He's got an MBA in economics from Stanford, really came in as an analyst in the football research department for the 49ers, and then more recently has been in Cleveland, where the general manager there, Andrew Berry, thinks it's really valuable to give all those guys exposure to different areas. So even though Adofo-Mensah comes up on the analytics side or the research side, he gets exposed to scouting and operations and to everything else. So that cross-training is generally regarded as being a really good thing for general manager candidates. And then late last night, my colleague Mike Garafolo reported a couple of other requests that went in with a couple of the Eagles executives. One is Brandon Brown, who again is another person who kept on the scouting side. And the other one that you'll hear plenty about for a variety of reasons is Catherine Raiche, who is a former CFL and XFL executive. She joined the Eagles in 2019, was promoted this past year to Vice President of Football Operations, which is a job title that Andrew Berry once held in Philadelphia. So they think highly of her within that organization. She's currently the highest ranking woman in personnel within the NFL, which is saying something because there are not that many women yet on the coaching or the personnel side. So the fact that you have somebody who's high ranking, get an opportunity to get in front of decision makers with an NFL team, it's an important part in the process here as the NFL continues to promote not just diversity, but also gender equality in terms of the ability to have the opportunities to get some of these positions.
Well, she wouldn't be the first GM, though, a female GM in the league. That was back in the 80s with the Eagles. And so that's pretty impressive, her resume. But the Wilfs haven't hired a GM since 2005, or since buying the team in 2005. And when you look at the coaching side of things, they've made a couple of decisions there. Where do you think the Wilfs will go when it comes to the head coach?
I think some of that's going to be guided by what the general manager's thought process is going to be. So you're going to go down that road first. You always make certain connections of who may have worked with somebody in the past or had some type of a relationship with them. That's one way to kind of figure out where initially they would look. I would certainly think, based on the fact that the past two head coaches in Minnesota have been from defensive backgrounds, Leslie Frazier and Mike Zimmer. And certainly there have been frustrations at various points with the offense over the course of time under whoever's been head coach in Minnesota. I would think that there would be an inclination to try to bring in somebody with an offensive background. Again, doesn't mean it's a disqualifier if you have a defensive coach or somebody on special teams, but I would think that you were going to look heavily into the offensive bucket just to try to figure out, with all that bright young talent on offense and frankly some of the frustration that you've heard expressed in very diplomatic terms by the likes of Justin Jefferson about how they're playing football, it would make a lot of sense to try to just inject some new juice. There's always a theory within the NFL you kind of do the opposite from your previous head coach. So hiring a young, offensive-minded person would certainly be a potential fit. Some of the names that could come up that are going to come up for a lot of these jobs. Nathaniel Hackett, who's the Packers offensive coordinator, who's going to be a candidate. He's already got 3 interview slips in. Certainly that's going to be somebody who's interesting. Their quarterbacks coach, Luke Getsy from Green Bay, also has an interview slip in from the Denver Broncos. You've got some younger guys like Kevin O'Connell, the Rams offensive coordinator, who has a request in from Denver as well. Of course, there's guys like Eric Bieniemy, who's been in Minnesota before, as the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. His name comes up on a perennial basis, and there's many more that I'm not going to mention here because we could go on for hours on this. But there's a lot to dig into. I think that it's also important to understand, even though again that you're probably predisposed to looking for someone from an offensive background, the number one quality that many teams look for is going to be a leader of men, have a leadership trait, be somebody who can get in front of the room and get everybody on board with the program. It's not just a matter of you come in, you hire the best person for the best offense, because guess what? Eric Bieniemy can't bring Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill with him. You need to have that ability to put together the entire program. The Vikings will certainly be looking for that through the course of this process, but every team's criteria is different, which is why every team's interview list is different.
Yeah, you mentioned that word leadership, something Mark Wilf spoke a lot about on Monday. Leadership, collaboration, and communication, things that they'll look for, and staying on their own timeline. However, Tom, I know that the Vikings are one of 3 teams looking for both positions. How does the rest of the coaching hires or those coaching hiring processes affect the Vikings hiring process?
Well, I would say the main way that it'll be impacted initially is because you have other teams that are in the head coach hiring process right now in terms of interview requests are going in right now, as opposed to the Vikings and the Giants are doing their general manager first. That doesn't necessarily put them behind, but it does change just kind of the way that the timelines sync up. I think the one thing that's a common thread when I've talked to teams, when I've talked to candidates and everyone else, is that you're going to have a more extended process this year for a couple of reasons. One, there's only 2 buys now, so there's not a lot of candidates who are even allowed to interview this week. Many of them cannot interview until after their wild card games.
Okay.
Secondly, there's a new requirement for teams under the Rooney Rule to have an in-person interview with at least one external minority candidate for all head coach and general manager openings. That's going to be a net positive because it's going to get teams to be exposed in person to a variety of different viewpoints, see more people in person. A big part of the NFL's diversity push has been slowing down the process. So it's not as if the Vikings are going to hire a general manager next week and all the good head coaching candidates are gone. Teams are, Jacksonville's ahead. They may be in a position to hire somebody sooner than later. But a lot of these other teams, it's going to take some time here until you're able to get certainly second interviews with people. I would anticipate that you're going to get some hires during divisional playoff week, at least 1 or 2, just because that's how it always works. But there's going to be jobs that are still open later than that. And so, yes, it's going to be an impact, no question about it. But, is it going to be something that's a hindrance to them? No, because this is how they've decided to set up their program, hiring the GM first, and then you're going to work within the contracts of what that person wants to do.
Thank you so much, NFL Network's Tom Pelissero, for being here. We always enjoy your insight. Really like that last point because I know Vikings fans are waiting in anticipation to see what happens next. Again, Tom, thank you so much.